citizen, same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome. Welcome everybody to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast, where each week we have exciting solutionaries. In a world filled with problems, our focus is on people who are creating new, creative, thoughtful solutions, part of what Gary Davis called the People Powered Planet. And today our special guests are Marla Slavner and her daughter, Kasha Sequoia, who are producers and director of the Sunrise Storyteller project. Marla is also a founding director of the International Children's Art Foundation. And Kasha, well, she's been an activist since she was 8 years old. At age 16, she got started on a journey traveling around the world, creating the film Sunrise Storyteller. But before I let her tell us about that wonderful film, I'm going to mention that she's a recipient of the Diana Award, honored for Princess Diana. She's also a global climate ambassador of the global youth youth network. She's a 12 times UN delegate from the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. She's done more at her young age. At age 17, she even published a book. It's a book that goes along with Sunrise Storyteller, of the photos and reflections and ideas. She's won all kinds of prizes, the Ron Kovic Peace Award, Women Transforming Media Award, etc. And she's working on a new doc, and we'll get to that later. So without further ado, let me welcome Kasha and Marla Slavner. Welcome to our show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here today.
I want to start just by asking you to tell us a little more about the movie. First of all, why did you pick the name Sunrise Storyteller, and what's your movie about?
So I'll start with a little bit of the inspiration behind the film before I explain the title, so that it makes sense. So on my first trip down to the UN in 2013 as a delegate for the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, I was meeting women from all around the world who were sharing their stories of the pressing challenges they were facing in regards to achieving gender justice. And they were sharing kind of the works of their organizations at the grassroots level. And I was really inspired by what they were doing in their communities to bring about sustainable change. And I reflected upon my own skills and experiences, and I thought, you know, maybe if people could hear their stories, they would feel inspired to take action in the world. So I pitched a crazy idea to my mom to take a year out of school, to fundraise to take a year out of school to make well, at first it started out as a photo project, and it later developed into a mini, like a 64-minute long film. But I decided to name it the Sunrise Storyteller because the sunrise is a symbol for hope. And every morning when we wake up, we have a fresh chance to take steps into the world that are positive, and that contribute to the betterment of society. So I thought, you know, as the Sunrise Storyteller, I could go around and share the stories, or provide a space for people to share their own stories of triumph over adversity.
I love that image. I mean, here the sun is going around the world, waking people up. They're all awakening to a new morning. And where did you go, and what did you do, and what did you discover?
Mm-hmm. So we traveled kind of without a plan. We really have been resourceful along the way. We started without enough money to even return home, so we crowdsourced along the trip to actually get home from our 6 months abroad. But we traveled throughout South Africa, up to Mozambique, through Tanzania, and then over to Thailand for a total of 6 months, averaging about a month to 2 months in each location. And the stories that are reflected in the film are really humble human stories. You know, maybe they're not all these large-scale organizations that are mobilizing massive change around the world, but they're people who are making a difference in their own individual communities. And we covered issues like human trafficking. We covered education for girls. We covered the topic of peace and forgiveness with napalm survivor Kim Phuc, from the Vietnam War, and various other topics. So it was a global scale, looking at the different issues that we're facing around the world.
Well, when you, one of the things that attracted me is that like us, you're saying you're focusing on the positive. Tell me about your vision for how you wanted to create something positive in the world.
I think storytelling has a great deal of responsibility to how we perceive the world around us. And as a teenager watching the news, all I was used to seeing was images of war, poverty, the climate crisis. Like, we're seeing very negative depictions of what's happening in the world. And of course, that's what is truly happening in the world. But I felt like the mainstream media wasn't doing justice to the creativity of people at the grassroots level. And it tended to play up on stereotypes about what they would have called the third world countries back in like 2013, which we now know as the global south. But it creates quite a polarization and kind of dehumanizes people. And I really wanted to connect other people to the humanity that exists in all of us. So that's how I wanted to create, share solution-oriented stories.
Well, it's interesting because you promoted your film as, in a world of a lot of negative films. Here's a positive story. And yet one of your stories here is about the young woman who was an icon. You mentioned watching TV, became an iconic image of the Vietnam War when she was running naked with napalm burns, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I say positive storytelling, it's not to look at the world with a naive, rose-colored glasses kind of lens. I think the most positive stories are those that show the resilience and triumph over adversity. So showing what people have gone through in their lives to overcome those struggles that they face. So of course, Kim is a great example of a woman who faced immense hardship due to war and violence, and ultimately the napalm bomb that burned her whole body. And she discussed how she created peace within herself, moving on from that horrific trauma in her life, and how she continued to translate that into peace in her community and the world. And she became a global peace ambassador through that work. And she's hoping to help other people who have been through war themselves to find peace.
Wow. Well, that's so important. I mean, the media does, like you say, like to go from bad news to bad news to bad news. And then what's the next shock story? And you never see in the media, hey, remember that young girl running from napalm? She's a global peace ambassador. She's done all these things. We don't even hear that side of the world and the news. It's like that didn't even exist. They seem to follow that if it leads, it bleeds.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think we do about creating new ways of creating the stories of our world?
I think that it comes with, I think first of all, we have to invest in storytellers from all races, all religions, all gender identities, all sexualities to tell their own stories. It's easy for me to say, like, I'm very aware of my own privilege as a white woman going into these places, and that's why I wanted to make the film a space for people to share their own stories. I didn't want to say, here's this person, here's what they went through, and here's how they're going, like how they're moving on from it or how they're solving the challenge. Like, it's them, just them. You don't hear my voice really until their segment has finished. But I think, yeah, we really need to invest in diverse storytellers to accurately represent their own challenges, their own celebrations, their own stories. So I think that's a big part.
In addition to Kim's story, what were some of the other people who inspired you when you went to talk to them that you filmed?
I would say I mostly gravitated towards young women because traveling to countries around the world for the first time, I'd only really been outside of Canada to the US. So I was experiencing the world as a global citizen for the first time. And I was curious about the challenges and hardships that young women around the world were facing. And of course, access to education is a huge one. Teenage pregnancy was a big challenge that some of the girls that I talked with were facing. So hearing how they were able to step into a role of leadership despite the expectations that were placed on them or the societal kind of norms and systems of oppression that they were facing. It was inspiring to hear, and also like I was learning a lot from them and their personal resilience. So I think that those are kind of the people who inspired me most, were my own peers.
Well, what's one other compelling person in addition to Kim that would make us all want to go watch your movie right away?
I think, yeah, the story of Napdao, or her indigenous name was Senglao. She was from Myanmar, and her family, they fled to Thailand because of the ongoing conflict that they were facing. So her and her family walked from their village to Thailand, and on the way, she was wearing a pair of flip-flops. You know, that's all she kind of had, and she had one break, so she had to walk on one shoe across the border. When she got to Thailand, she wasn't even able to enroll in schools there because of the language barrier and discrimination against foreigners, refugees, and indigenous peoples. So she actually sold fruit to kids at the school that she had applied to. But then she discovered that there was a local organization called Thai Freedom House that works to educate refugees. They focused on language, arts, math, and I believe they had some science courses. And through attending classes there, she was finally able to attend university with no other formal education. So that organization really helps a lot of young people and gives them an access to opportunity that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think she's a shining example of somebody who proves the message of the film.
A number of our viewers are Rotarians, and I think they'll especially enjoy your movie because all over the world, Rotary groups are doing similar kinds of things to help women's education, girls' education, help people with some of the very issues you're talking about. And your film can be an inspiring example of the impact of that and how that does change lives and empower people to do some great things. So thank you for sharing that film with us. Tell us a little bit more about the reception that the film has had, and how that has helped build a movement, or what's come out of it.
The film has surprising, for a first-time filmmaker, it's received a surprisingly positive reception. It's hard to put work into the world that you care so much about. So, you know, we're lucky to have screened the film at 60 festivals. And we've
festivals. Wow, that's a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, and part of my strategy as a filmmaker is not only to create, you know, inspiring media, but to translate that into concrete action, specifically for youth. So we've been going into high schools and universities, screening the film, but also pairing it with a workshop on civic engagement and help youth kind of think about how they can make a positive impact in the world based on the skills and talents they already have. So that's been, you know, I think that's been our main focus for the past 4 years, has been really making sure that it impacts the right people. Yeah.
And what awards has it received?
We received.
Well, she doesn't like to brag.
Well,
I do.
Yeah.
Let your mom answer that question.
Modestly won 29 awards. For the
29
film.
awards. Tell us a little. Why don't you jump in a little bit? Tell us a little bit more about how you feel about what your daughter's been doing here and what kind of awards she's gotten.
I'm of the same opinion as her. It's nice to be recognized for the work you do. It helps to build the base for the project, you know, going forward. But it really isn't about the personal prize. You know, it's about the work and the service. And I've watched her put in 15, 16-hour days, many, many weeks on end, producing, you know, this film. And then following up, you know, it didn't stop there after you produced the film. She did the guide for, you know, students. And so the biggest satisfaction is watching her passion for what she's doing and seeing her make impact that, you know, and seeing having her watch herself in the process make impact. That yes, if I work hard and if I'm doing, you know, this consistently and I'm chipping away at the bigger vision, that things will happen. And eventually, you know, the film will get done, or the workshop will get done, or that, you know, people will come up to her at screenings or emails. You know, I've watched your film. It encouraged me to start my own nonprofit, or I'm looking to do this project with my school, or we studied you in school. There's been all kinds of interesting stories. And so for us, it's really about, it's bigger than us, and she gets that. And I think as a parent, to see her get an education that's not formal. She's done this outside of the realm of formal education, but it's no less worthy or impactful than had she had a master's in global citizenship.
Was the high school at all a part of it, or supportive of your adventure?
When I came back in my summers, I would script the film, like do the script writing process, transcriptions of all the footage that I had collected. And then the next summer I was editing, and it went into my final season. So I was finishing the film while I had, you know, 5 final projects and 5 exams, and we were packing up the house to move. And so like school was another thing to balance on top of the film. And, you know, we have this great system in Ontario called prior learning assessment and recognition. So I was able to actually meet with an assessor and prove that I had the skills to meet criteria for a course. So I did like grade 10 media studies. And I showed that through my work, I actually had the knowledge to gain credits for towards my graduation. So that was cool.
Oh, good. So even though you took a year off school, you were able to get some school credit for making this film. Good for them, because you certainly deserve credit.
The most asked question while we were traveling for the project was, how did you allow your daughter to go out of school? How did the system let your, you know, like, because a lot of countries will not let you take your kid out of school to do this kind of thing. And we were able to, so.
Wow, well, what a global education. So as you've traveled around the world, seeing people of different cultures, what would you say your overall impression is about the state of the human race right now? That's a big question, but how did you feel about people as you travel around the world? Did you see people being similar, different? What was your reactions as a global citizen?
I think that internally we are all very similar, but we face very different external challenges. And that, you know, I think that people's personal impacts on their community is really important. We all need to continue to show up and continue to do our part every day, because that's the only way things are going to get done. But of course, like, we're similar in a lot of ways. We're also different in a lot of ways. So it's finding harmony among those two, and, you know, just connecting with people as people, and being open to listen to their experiences, their views, their, I guess, their cultures. So I think that that's kind of, it's been eye-opening to travel and learn a lot from everybody that I've had the chance to meet.
Well, you know, you got the idea for Sunrise Storyteller in 2013, the year that Gary Davis passed away. Now, Gary Davis is the subject of our film, The World Is My Country, and he's the inspiration for creating this People Powered Planet podcast, because one of the things he calls for in the film is, says, you know, let's stop beating our heads against the wall trying to convince these broken nation states to reform themselves. Why don't, if all the constitutions say we the people create government, why don't we just go ahead and do it, folks? And he's launched that mission to empower us to do a people-powered planet. What was your reaction? One of Gary's key objectives, of course, was to pass the baton to young people. If you know, if you saw the film, he didn't want people to put the credit to him. He wanted to turn it back to the people. Did he help succeed in inspiring you?
Oh, absolutely. I was very inspired by his story and his efforts. I think that, of course, we need to I think that passing the baton is an interesting way to look at it. I think that we need to share responsibility among generations. Like, I think we need to uplift the youth that we hope to empower to take action, and provide them with like mentorship and support along the way. So, it's not only our personal responsibility, but it's all of us. We're all living on this earth. We're all responsible for what happens to it. And I liked his idea of, breaking down those barriers that simply divide us. So how do we find unity among everything?
I would add that in terms of passing the baton, we need to give more space to youth, not just tokenism in terms of having you at the table, but really get them involved in decision and policy. In a few years, her cohort may be the next politicians, that are running the country. So we want to prep youth for that opportunity, I would hope. That we're not just saying we want youth involved, but we're actually really giving them the power, and we're sharing that power, right?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Tell us some more about your thoughts and comments about Gary's idea that basically that we break out of this nation state box and begin to find a way to interactively create government that brings to the top the highest and best wisdom of each individual on the planet. How did his ideas resonate with you, and what did they spark in you as far as your thinking about the future?
I think that we are dealing with some very outdated systems at the moment that continue to oppress marginalized people. So if we can create a new system that treats everybody with equity, not just like, we're not just equal like that. We have to lift people up who have been oppressed for a very long time. We have to provide them with more access to opportunities. We need to take into their concerns in creating our new systems of thinking, because for a very long time we've just been like, it's been white men at the top who are protecting their peers, and we need to shift to a global focus that's not only thinking from a Western standpoint of view. Like, I think we need collaborative efforts in our solutionary thinking. So I believe that the idea of being global citizens and world citizens is a very important, personal mandate to take on in our efforts to change the world. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, we see the pandemic, and it's halted the world in its tracks. And the talk is we don't just build back, we have to build back better. So I think that's where Gary Davis, is very relevant to what we're in right now in terms of, the global situation. He saw it coming. Yeah. I mean, he was a visionary, and building back better requires everybody's use of talents and creativity. And I think that's the key to, if we can harness the creativity of everyone and their purpose, which is actually what Kasha goes into in her workshop with students, to get them to recognize what their skills and their special interests and talents are, and to really catalyze that, then they're moving towards those solutions. I mean, the vaccine was dreamed up in a year, or the possibilities are there when the creativity is harnessed. It's the lack of creativity that has gotten us in this mess in the first place.
Right. Well, one of the inspirations for Gary Davis's project was Buckminster Fuller, who he designed his whole system of synergistic governance around that. And Bucky Fuller said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. What do you think of the prospects? We see young people all over the world, people like Greta and others, We see all the amazing young students from the Parkland High School who stood up after the shootings there. We see young people taking leads in the climate movement. What do you see as the possibilities that the youth of this world can begin to create a new model and leave the old broken systems behind?
I think that's an interesting question, because I think the solutions already exist. There's just a lack of political will to implement them. You know, we have like huge military budgets, specifically in the US. We're spending over $1 trillion per year on the military. We could be divesting that money, at least a portion of it, to, you know, feed people. We could be making sure everybody has access to clean water. We could, like, there's so many things that we could be doing if we looked at the ways in which we're continuing to rule our world currently. Like, we have I think the main message youth are saying, like, putting out there is, not only do we need to think of new systems that work, but we also need to, like, look at the solutions that we already have that we could be implementing right now. So I think it's a combination of both.
And then in terms of, you know, where can they take it? They're already working on campaigns across universities to get universities to divest. They're even deciding that maybe I won't go to that university because they're, you know, they're backing fossil fuel or militarism. And so, you know, it's the same consumer choice. It's like, I can buy something that's going to pollute the environment, or I can choose something that's more eco-friendly and you know, vote with my dollars. And so, you know, I can vote my education path I'm talking North America mostly, right? It's, you know, this is not the privilege that everyone has globally, but where, you know, where the most money is spent in militarism and the most damage is being done to the environment, you know, peoples of those countries particularly can be effective in turning things around. And if those things turn around, then it's possible to turn everything around.
It's very interesting that you mentioned, you know, kids not going to schools that are, you know, supporting military research and so on. That I used to have many discussions with Gary Davis about how do we create this people-powered planet and this whole synergistic system of global democracy built on this Bucky Fuller idea of the geodesic sphere. You know, the old organization chart was, you know, the king on top and everybody else underneath, the president on top and everybody down the line. He said, what if you change that all to a geodesic sphere? And, you know, say you take a company, you know, in each area, the person on top of the world is in charge of that area. So say you take the janitor who cleans the bathroom. Well, he's on top of the world because the bathrooms are all overflowing and not cleaned, and the whole company is going to shut down. So he's on top of the world when it comes to keeping that clean, but he can't do it unless he has, you know, toilet paper and everything from supply. So the supply and personnel department, they're on top of the world, or the people who hire him, they're on top, personnel. So everybody in that globe is on top of the world in their sphere, and they're all interacting to create a whole instead of that top-down model. And in this model, you know, he talked about if we do create this governance systems where we have small groups like this synergistically coming up with what are our highest and best ideas, what are our real hopes and dreams and so on, and have those cross-cultural with people, you know, Arabs and Jews in the same conference and people in opposite sides of battles and wars, all interacting in these small groups that interact with others, that we can begin to emerge up to a system where we can, for instance, pass, as we saw in the film, the Global Clean Air Act. And then, you know, we talked with Gary, well, okay, so how's it going to be enforced? Well, we're not going to have, you know, cops and guns and all this. It's going to be just what you said. You know, you go onto a site to, you sign up as a world citizen and you add an app to your computer and you go to a site that says, I'm going to apply to a university. Oh, beep, beep, this university is a world law violator. The people of the world passed this law, they're violating it. Oh, I'm going to go shop at this product. I go down the store, I scan the supermarket. Oh, beep, beep, this company is either a world law violator or supplying one. Ah, but here's a product that's green and it's not. Okay, I'm going to buy that product. And, you know, you go to a site to apply for jobs. And again, you have this widget on your computer pops up, oh, these are world law violators. So we the people, find a way to enforce the laws created by the people of the world without guns and bombs, without top-down force, but just from the bottom up, global democracy. What did you think when you saw that part of the film with Gary? Did you think there's a chance that young people today could get excited by a vision of moving forward in such a way?
There's absolutely. We're trying to think innovatively and creatively, and if something's gonna work, well, I think we'll take it. But we have to, examine it as a workable solution for the future and how it can, and how it can work for everybody. So yeah, we have to. There's no point in not bringing it to youth to see what we can do.
And for youth, it's really about justice, and justice has to be holistic. Really, it has to work for everyone, right? And as you said, and that's what the indigenous wisdom, is in terms of circular thinking. Like when you're talking geodesic, I'm thinking circular as well. Like, what goes around comes around, and also the path, of decision making, not just being limited to the here and now, but to the next 7 generations. Yeah. When you put that lens on something in terms of problem solving, it has a whole different, take. You see where, the gaps are and where things won't work if you look at it from that long term.
I love that 7 generations, and I love that you're talking about youth and the elders and all of us getting together in an intergenerational thing. And of course, we have on our here on our podcast some amazing senior citizens. We have people like John Haggerty down here from Australia is on. We have people from from Ukraine, Jean from Ukraine. We have Yale and Taos. Mike, we have people from all over the world joining us in this podcast. David Gallup from Washington, D.C. So why don't we, at this point, why don't I turn it over to Melanie to take questions from our marvelous audience who's joining us here, and turn all your cameras on so you can interact and ask some questions.
Thank you, Arthur. And Marla, just what you were saying, how just a second ago about looking forward to the future. I think we should all ask whatever, before you do anything, say, is this good for the world? I mean, just a simple question, it just changes it around. So I really, yes, we can, that's missing. And then Kasha, wow, you are phenomenal. Look at you. Well, thank you so much. And then we were talking earlier about how it's you don't want to be the one or whatever, and it's more important for us all to work together to do this together, intergenerational, like you said. And I think that's key. It's not on one person's shoulders. We all need to participate, and just like Arthur said, we've got a lot of people here, intergenerational, here today on the podcast that are doing that. And so it's totally doable, and it's exciting, and it's so great that you're doing all this. Yes, we have questions, and I'd like to go to first. We have on the podcast David Gallup, who is actually the president of the World Service Authority, and he would like to ask a question. So David, go right ahead with your question. Thank you.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I'm here at the office providing documents of global identification of travel so people can self-identify and identify to the rest of the world as world citizens. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done in shedding light on vulnerable populations and what they face, because that's something that, as a human rights lawyer, I see every day. People come to us who, not only are missing a shoe, but are missing, just basic things that us in the so-called first world or overdeveloped world take for granted, like just having a document like a passport or an ID can mean that you can start conducting investments or have own property or other things, like I said, that we take for granted. And it's not right that we live in a world of this great disparity, this inequity, as you put it. So one thing I really would love to mention, and Arthur mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, and that is we are focused on creating world citizen clubs. So I would love to work with you, and maybe we, outside of this conversation, of course, today, have a Zoom meeting where we can talk about establishing more world citizen clubs on high school and college campuses around North America, and then, of course, around the world, to have youth share their passion for changing the world. That's what it's about. The club is about. We don't tell students, you should do this, you should do that. We want students on their own to take their passion for environmental activism, for gender equality, for racial and ethnic justice, and take those themes and do programs, projects, events, and activities locally on their campus and in their community, but that also can have a global impact. And we hope to have students meet with other students and other clubs around the world to share their knowledge. And one other quick thing, because I think you're in Canada, and I may have mentioned this to you in an email previously, but there's a great group called Square Meter for Peace. They're in Winnipeg, Canada, and it's a women-founded and women-run social entrepreneurship organization, which also has the idea of taking great practices that people are doing in could be in a small village that's done indigenously, that is sustainable for the planet, sustainable for that particular community, and take those ideas and share them with other, especially women who have been, sort of precluded from participating fully in the world economic situation. So anyway, several different areas where I'd love to, separately from the podcast, to talk with you about this work and how we can work together to make these things happen. Thank you so much for all that you've done and your wonderful documentary.
Thank you. Thanks so much for everything you're doing as well. I would love to chat more about that.
Thanks.
Wonderful. And then we'll eventually get in the chat your connections, how people can reach and get a hold of you. But you have the website already in the chat. So yes, now thank you so much, David. Yes, incredible work he's doing, and so powerful. Yes, everyone should be doing their passion. Everyone should be, that's the key thing. You shouldn't be stuck in whatever unhappy job you're in. You should be doing your passion, and that helps the world so much more. Yes, now, Yale, we'd like to go to you. Yale, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure. Well, first I want to say, Kasha, I've been my 80th trip around the sun, and seeing somebody your age doing this just gives me such great hope and inspires me. And, so I thank you. And Marla, you're a remarkable mother. I don't know how many mothers would do what you've done, support your daughter in this, work with her. It's just amazing. So thank you. And I want to know, how can we access the film?
That's a great question. So currently we only have it available for community screenings and school screenings. So that's a licensing fee. It's not currently available on streaming services or on demand, just because we've been trying to get it out to the educational market first. But if anybody wants to organize a community screening online, we're open to hosting those. So our email is in the chat, and you can contact us directly.
When it is more commonly available, I hope you will let Arthur know so he can fill us in.
Absolutely.
That's the funny thing about film. It's a little tricky. You want to get it to the educational market before you're kind of stuck a little bit in the release of, you think people think you can just get it out on YouTube, but there's a lot more to it. So yeah, definitely we'll do that for our club. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Now, one of the wish items, we've always had on the wish list is if we get, an umbrella sponsor, an educational sponsor that would like to kind of cover a big bulk drop of licenses, and then we can just get it out
freely.
Free, so that's on my list that I've been looking, so just putting
so anyone out there, you heard it from Marla.
I see that there's a question in the chat. The film is 64 minutes long, so it's a good length to host a screening and then a half-hour conversation after.
Yeah, we're committed now. This is a go. Now we'd like to go to Bud. Bud, could you please unmute yourself?
Terrific. Well, I just wanted to thank both you, Kasha and Marla. Arthur and Melanie and I have been stirring up good trouble for quite some time now, together and collectively, and it's wonderful to see some youthful energy. I think your presence today, you'd better buckle your seatbelt, because a lot of us elders are wanting to work in a cross-generational way to support good energy and positive solutions. I'm just curious if you, how many other youth organizations are you doing work with at the moment? And the other little bit of a follow-up question, especially in regards to the peace dividend of shifting away from the military-industrial complex. Are you familiar with the Earth Restoration Corps initiative that was founded by Maurice Strong's wife, Hannah Strong, many, many years ago? And if you don't know of Maurice Strong, he was the convener of the very first Earth Summit, United Nations Conference on the Environment in Stockholm in '72, and was tagged again to run the Earth Summit in Rio in '92. And just as another aside, with Arthur's connections now with Rotary, for a few years I was a member of the Aspen Rotary Club in Colorado, and I went to the Earth Summit to meet Paulo Costa, who was the international president of Rotary, who launched the Preserve Planet Earth campaign initiative within the world of Rotary. And I would advocate that we could find a grant to support your showing of your film to every Preserve Planet Earth campaign committee, and then by default to the rest of all the Rotary clubs in 120 countries around the world, which is why I suggested you might want to fasten your seatbelt.
Wow, I had no clue about the initiative, but I believe...
Well, Maurice Strong, here's an interesting anecdote story going back. In 1992, I was the youth representative for the Toronto UNESCO Club for the Rio Summit.
Ah, well, maybe we met, because I was Kirk Bergstrom's assistant with the Global Youth Summit.
Okay, all right.
And Gary Davis and I went down to that same Earth Summit.
This is a good segue for her to talk about her new film.
Briefly,
if you don't
we
mind.
have time.
Yes, please.
I did bring up, of course, the military-industrial complex and climate justice as two issues of interest and kind of areas that we need to shift our thinking. Because I'm working on my second feature, which is called 1.5 Degrees of Peace, which is looking at the intersection between peace, conflict, and the climate crisis, and how we can unify the two movements to create a more sustainable future for our generations to come. And we're looking to feature youth who are at the forefront of bringing those together. So that's kind of, we're in the process. We just got a small grant to put together a 2 to 3 minute demo, which will be done in the next couple of months. So we're hoping to do some screenings of that, community screenings while we're fundraising for the full feature. But yeah, it is like the military-industrial complex is a huge contributor to the climate crisis that we're currently facing. So really educating people on those links.
That's fabulous. And what I wanted to give you is a little bit of a broader picture of Earth Restoration Corps. The concept there is to convert all of the well-trained military individuals into Earth restoration activities rather than spending their time killing people. Mm-hmm. So that's the concept behind the Earth Restoration Corps. And it has a legacy and a track record of at least a couple of decades of bringing youth into the mountains of Colorado and elsewhere with indigenous elders. And a lot of my work with deepnaturejourneys.com is to bring people through a rite of passage that is earth-centered leadership development training and a rite of passage solo, so that I often characterize we older folks as aging, uninitiated adolescents wandering around in aging bodies, uninitiated because we haven't had an earth-centered, earth-cherishing educational curriculum to experience the profound power of receiving an empowerment from Gaia and Mother Earth through the rites of passage process of quieting the mind and opening the human heart by immersion, biophilia, if that's a concept you're familiar with, that E.O. Wilson out of Yale or out of Harvard and Stephen Kellert out of Yale have popularized through their book on biophilia, the absolute human need to have direct connection with the natural world.
Wow, Bud, thank you. That's so educational, and I'm so glad you both have these connections now. And make sure don't leave until you put in a good way to connect you. Everybody can connect, and we can continue this conversation because that is incredible. So yes, and now we have another question. We are all the way from Australia. We have John Haggerty. John, if you want to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, congratulations and best wishes. By the way, we have a marvelous education system in Australia, but I spent 18 months in Canada and travelled in the US, and we certainly need those perspectives. Story, can I say, everybody's got stories, and for instance, one of the latest stories, and related to my question, can we see a coffee cup?
Yeah.
One of the best conferences, I ever went to was Key People Were Crazy Might Work, more stories there. But when you take a year off in your teens, some people would say, oh, that's a bit unusual. And often they would say crazy. And that, I think it's absolutely marvelous, innovation, all that sort of thing. And thanks for giving your daughter such support, because sometimes other people don't, you get some negative aspects. So my question is, because I do some things like that are crazy. Okay, two questions. Number one, how do you overcome that aspect that some people think it's crazy, and tactfully overcome the criticism which is sometimes there? The second thing, hopefully you're getting support. For instance, recently I was given hundreds of books, and I'm in trouble because I've got too many books, but this one I happened to open at the start, and it's signed by Sir Edmund Hillary. I don't know whether you can see that one. I was given hundreds of books, and all of a sudden here's this wonderful opportunity. Okay, thanks and best wishes, but my question, how did you overcome the feeling, and especially if you say everybody can do something, you almost put a guilt trip on them, and some people object to that. You're wanting everybody to help, which they can, it's just a choice. So any comments on how you overcame that feeling that people think you're crazy?
Good question. I think that the vision for a better world is probably what keeps us going.
Absolutely.
And that sustained action. Not everybody's gonna agree with the way that we think or the way that we do things. But as long as we believe that we are continuing to uphold our values of justice and equity and peace, we're doing what we can. So that's all that we can do. I think that, we, at the beginning of the journey, I think you will say that we didn't have even the support from our direct circles, like our family and friends who may not have understood that. But we do now. We just saw, we do now, but we also just saw no other alternative to, we just couldn't help but act. And that's, we wanted to contribute in the best way that we could. So that's how we did it.
Crazier gets crazier. Because we went without a way back. And so we just found it within ourselves to do whatever it took to get back and to make the film. And then, going on part 2 to sustain the film without, selling our souls and going back to that drudgery of whatever that routine used to be. I just decided, well, I can sell the house and we can, continue to do this for as long as we can, which is not very long, but at least it'll be a little longer. You know, some people thought that was a little crazy.
Resourceful, I guess.
You know, but
very
it's
thankful.
when you have that vision that she did, it, you know, it almost comes secondary. The, you know, the shoulds and all of that, the vision and the service to do something when you see that crisis ahead of you is, you know, that becomes the bigger why.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Well
Amelia.
put. Wow, Marla, my goodness, yes, you would have sold the house, and that's how much you care about the earth, you know, and it really puts it in perspective. Here you are, you know, it's just here's the house. It could be money that could be used for this. So thank you both for this passion, my goodness, and we're so pleased that the family circle didn't stop you, and now they're on board. That's awesome. Now we have another question from Michael Goldberg. If you would please unmute and ask your question, please. Michael. Uh-oh, shoot, an audio problem. Let's see, Michael, if you want to, I think I saw your question. He said, thank you for being on here today. As a retired teacher and currently a state licensed security guard at 74 years young, I may not have much time and life to be wasting on whatever is not helping mankind and animals to survive without the constant threats to our well-being. How may we convince the so-called authorities to at least consider a better way for all of us to live a better life? I was able to change some of the old South thinking in Florida prison system by first listening to everyone and then go about trying to make positive changes that benefited all. Win-win. Thank you for considering my lengthy question, gratefully. So yes, so how can we convince the so-called authorities to at least consider a better way for all of us?
That's a really great question. I think that, to be honest, I don't have a full answer yet because I'm still trying to figure it out as a young person navigating the world and navigating my activism journey. We've been pretty relentless in our circles to just show up and knock on the doors and continue to try and make ourselves heard, even if we're not given a seat at the table. You know, we'll be right outside ready to like ask our questions, hold people accountable, and continue to share our stories.
And the youth vote, I mean, that's voting, where they have the power when they're old enough.
Yeah.
And in Canada, we're actually, one of the senators that we know is lobbying to get the voting age down to 16 and get more youth involved. So, you know, we just witnessed the US election, and now you have different policies coming into place. So I think that's how you get the policing to change, is that the leadership at the top has to change and has to be in alignment with those policies that are good for everybody.
And,
yes.
And also continuing to do the work at the grassroots level, because we need both top-down and bottom-up solutions. So, you know, everybody at every angle, every sector, every level of experience, and, you know, working together.
Everyone together, perfect, yay. And dun, 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 I have Yale Jones just said, I just donated to your new film. I hope everyone here who can donate will. Kasha and Marla are two inspiring women. So yay, Yale. Wow, that's terrific. Okay, let's all support him, he says. And we do have Abdul. Abdul would like to ask a question. Let's see, Abdul from Pakistan.
First of all, thank you, my dear. You chanced me in question. Madam, my question you. How many you young people support our work and peace?
So she has a wide network of youth organizations at the global leadership level that she belongs to, which have peace advocates in there. But I would say all the youth that are working for the SDGs care about peace.
Yeah.
The problem is there isn't enough peace education. And the type of peace education doesn't get into the hardcore issues that need to be addressed. We don't know why, but if it's from parents not wanting their kids to, it's traumatic material, let's face it. Learning about napalm bombs and, you know, nuclear is it's
Not
you know, it's not a lunch and learn kind of thing. It's you know, it's it's really difficult and it's very complicated, and so many youth don't really know the issues of militarism as they do the climate, which is why they've, you know, the climate movement has become so creative and diverse and youth engaged. But the peace, youth in peace, it has a long way to go. And this is the purpose of her film, is to really bring youth into the peace movement.
I think,
as well, and bring,
sorry.
you know, bring elders into the environmental sort of.
Yeah. I'm building coalitions with other young peacemakers. I'm currently active in a youth network, like developing a youth network for peace with the World Beyond War community. So, you know, we're trying our best to cultivate like not only a culture of peace, but, you know, war abolition, creating sustainable solutions. I think a lot of youth are peacemakers, they just don't realize it, and they don't have the education to know how, you know, peace and conflict are connected to the issues that they're already advocating for on the ground, like gender equality, climate justice, and the things that we're already contributing towards, you know, education for youth around the world. Like, they're all contributing to building a sustainable world, which is a peaceful world. So yeah, there is support for the peace movement. We just need to get people actively knowing that they're peace people.
Yes, love that. Now we are going, this was wonderful. The questions were fantastic, answers fantastic. And now we'd like to go back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away.
Well, first of all, I'm very excited and appreciate so much having you here. And I'm excited about your new documentary, 1.5 Degrees of Peace. What does the title 1.5 Degrees of Peace mean? And what do you see doing in this film?
So 1.5 Degrees of Peace came from the IPCC report that we should keep our global temperature under 1.5 degrees if we're to kind of halt the effects of climate change. And so that connects to, you know, we need to focus on climate efforts, but also peace together. So, you know, I just kind of thought of it as a little wordplay, bringing the two together, bridging the gaps between movements. And, you know, we're going to be featuring youth, but we're also having intergenerational voices of elders and activists who have been in those movements prior to us and have the experience to guide how we can mainstream a peace movement today. Because when you see peace, I think something that discourages a lot of youth from getting involved is it seems very top level. I think it's very like bureaucratic processes, very like highly involved in government, like policy making, or at least that's the public perception. Mm-hmm. So breaking it down to the grassroots level, what can people do to create peace while also advocating for climate justice, and how are the two connected?
Peace isn't as personal yet because it's, you know, many are not experiencing conflict, you know, especially a lot of the North American youth, right? That they don't know what a war zone looks like. They've not come, you know, into, although they might see it in the streets with gun violence, you know, but the bigger picture of, you know, nuclear warheads and, you know, arsenals, day to day, people don't see that. They're not, but they do see the effects of climate on a day to day.
Yeah.
Very, very good point. Well, I think that's an excellent point because, yeah, you don't get to have a sample Earth where we try out a nuclear war and give us the experience to say, well, let's not do it again. We only get one shot at this. So it's very important that you're helping to awake young people on this. Well, I just want to thank our marvelous guests. I think it's so important that we're creating this wonderful cross-generational dialogue. I'm glad that people on the call want to get behind working with you and helping you move forward with the next film. I'm very happy that you're working with World Beyond War, a fabulous organization. People should definitely go to that worldbeyondwar.org and learn about the connection between climate and war. The military actually is the major polluter and cause of climate damage in the world, and is the one that could ultimately I mean, the way a nuclear war would destroy us, even a very limited nuclear war, is that even a limited nuclear war would do what the meteor did that wiped out the dinosaurs. It would so damage the environment that life couldn't exist on this planet. So it is an essential issue, and they are tied together. And I'm so glad your next film is going to help young people understand and connect to that link. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is really a very special time because we are in the midst of launching the film The World Is My Country on public broadcasting stations across the country. And right now, if you go to, and we want to thank Yale so much. He's one of the key people who helped to issue the challenge that brought Rotarians into sponsoring a spot at the opening of the film that salutes Rotary and its work around the world, and also hopefully will help get this out to people in Rotary clubs around the world. So if you go to theworldismycountry.com/public TV, you will see a list of the, some 40 stations so far, Melanie, the stations that have already signed up to broadcast it and which areas. And you'll also learn how you can help promote getting it shown in your area. If your broadcasting station is not signed up for it, you'll see the NETA linked where it's available to stations, and you'll learn more about that. Also, if you are interested in the Rotary connection, and I'm so glad that my good friend Bud Wilson, who was really key, was part of creating the Choices Conference with John Denver, and has been key in this whole movement. Bud mentioned also tying Rotary in with these movements and these films. So that's so important. If you go to theworldismycountry.com/Rotary, you'll see a wonderful podcast we did with Shekhar Mehta, the president-elect of Rotary International. I'd love to hear more how he might connect with what Bud mentioned about a prior president who was moving forward in this direction. And I think the new Jennifer Jones, upcoming the Rotary president after Shekhar, I think we have an excellent connection. And I know a number of people on this call are with Rotary, Ann and others. Thanks everyone for joining us. Please do help us. Thanks to these wonderful donations by Yale and others. We were just yesterday able to engage one of the top social media people who works with public television stations around the country. It's been key in that whole area. Engage them to be doing our social media for the upcoming broadcasts. Thank you so much for giving us the resources to be able to do that. We also have one of the top station relations reps working with us in reaching out to people. And this is all thanks to the generous donations of so many of you, the big, wonderful donations and in the small ones. So thank you, everybody. Please do join us next week for another exciting episode of the People Powered Planet podcast every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, where we focus on solutions. And you are a marvelous solutionary. You're very inspiring. So thank you. Any last words before we sign off?
Just thank you for having me. Thank you for this conversation. And it was lovely to meet everybody. Continue building peace. And yeah, I look forward to staying connected with you all. So thank you.
By the way, I should mention that next week is Action Day, next Wednesday. And that is actually going to be a very special session where we're all strategizing on how we can help this film go far and wide. As we're launching this film, we need all of you. So do join us next week and help us strategize about next steps of how we can work together to build the people-powered planet.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video.